This episode of Scrolling to Death is sponsored by Bark Technologies. Bark offers parents advanced content monitoring for all of your child's devices. Bark is literally helping to save lives and has alerted parents to millions of life-threatening situations like self-harm and severe bullying. More on Bark in the episode notes. Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today, I am joined by the founder and CEO of Heat Initiative, Sarah Gardner. I'm so happy to have you here. People have been telling me for months and months that I need to talk to you. And we were supposed to talk a month or two ago, I think, but we wanted to make sure that we had this conversation at the right time because there is some major news that we want to talk about today. And that is a landmark lawsuit on behalf of thousands of survivors of child sexual abuse imagery. And the lawsuit is brought against Apple. So can you tell listeners what's going on and how Heat Initiative is involved?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I've been told the same about you, that you and I have been destined to connect for some time. So in order to talk about where we are today and this lawsuit against Apple, I'd really like to go back in time.
Sure.
Talk about Apple's lack of engagement in the child safety space at large over the last decade or so. So Apple's notorious for not participating in general child safety standards across their platform. And there was a moment a few years ago where it looked like that would change. So I don't know if you remember, but in August 2021, Apple announced that they were going to sort of enter the arena, if you will, and make changes to their platform to protect kids on their products. And also to stop the spread of child sexual abuse material. One of the key announcements that they made was that they were going to detect known child sexual abuse on iCloud.
Right.
And that was a signal to so many of us in the field, but more broadly to survivors of this horrific crime, that all of a sudden something that Apple had seemingly tried to pretend didn't exist, ignored, that they actually acknowledged it was a problem and they were going to do something about it. And so they announced that they were going to detect it. There was a bunch of things that sort of followed along from that over the next few months. And in the end, not only did they end up not moving forward with what they had announced, they completely walked away from the issue altogether. And it became more of like too bad moment. It was like, that crime is abhorrent and we're so sorry that that's happened, but there's really like nothing we can do about it.
Did they give a reason? Was there a reason given at the time?
The term they use now is like, it impairs the privacy and security of our users, which to your point, we can talk about a little bit more later. But like the injustice of that moment of, we talk about it at Heat, like, they sent out the rescue boats and then they like turned them around before they got there, is really like the energy behind our organization. And then also what we see manifesting with this lawsuit against Apple.
Okay. So in 2021, we knew that they have the technology to detect and remove child sexual abuse material, and they chose not to implement it. And so that's where this lawsuit comes from, is we have thousands, if not tens of thousands or more victims of this type of material being spread around. And Apple has every technology to remove it, but these victims are suffering. Okay. Have they acted since then? Has there been any updates made? Because someone did send me some screenshots actually last week, not knowing I was having this conversation. A mom sent me screenshots related to sensitive photos and video protection from the iPhone. So tell me about what they've done now.
So I'll kind of tell you a little bit about a few steps they have taken, but then also really anchoring it back into why this moment is so important, because their negligence around iCloud specifically and allowing these illegal images and videos to be stored and shared there has not been addressed in any way. So, and Apple likes to conflate it so that people think they're doing a lot to address that when they're actually not. They're addressing a slightly different issue. So what you referenced is the communication safety feature.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair to Apple, they have made headway on that. Heat has 3 demands of Apple, right? We want them to let kids report abuse that are happening to them.
Mm-hmm.
We want them to make the App Store safer for kids and to possibly prevent kids from downloading dangerous applications. Mm-hmm. And we want them to stop the sharing and spread of child sexual abuse content on iCloud. Those are 3 distinct ways we need Apple to do better in protecting kids on their platform. So on the first one about let kids report, the screenshot that you got that was shared with you is a communication safety feature that exists in iMessage, not having to do with iCloud whatsoever, that detects when kids may be having an unsafe interaction by sharing a nude photo or child sexual abuse content with someone else. And it flags that and now allows a child to report that to Apple directly. And that did not exist before a year or so ago. That's new development as of like September.
And this is so important because when I interview young adults who were groomed in their young teens, they didn't realize that what was happening to them on iMessage was wrong. And so having something pop up to say, I want to make sure you're safe. This is your choice. What does it say? Message a grown up. Like this is all so helpful and is, should have been done a long time ago. My question on this pop-up though is if they're identifying child sexual abuse material, whether it's potential or not, why do they still let the child view the photo? And I feel like we're back at like the hearing in January with, was it Ted Cruz like yelling at
That's a great
Zuckerberg.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. And one we should continue to ask them.
Yeah.
And pressure them on, right? Because to push that point a little bit further, especially if it is detecting known child sexual abuse content, there's no reason that image should render at all, like show up in that message. And just to be clear, I wanted to say that Apple did have sort of that warning system in place the last few years, but the ability for a kid then to report it to Apple, which is like the critical part, didn't exist until a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And that put too much onus on the child, right? So now you're asking a kid who's like in the moment of a potentially unsafe interaction to like have the wherewithal to like go know where to report that and get help. And they, you could click through and get help resources, which are good. It's better than nothing. But to your point, like when you think about if a 12-year-old kid is getting groomed by their basketball coach and their basketball coach is sending them child sexual abuse material on iCloud, like that interaction needs to be detected and reported and that child needs to be like safeguarded. This isn't a moment to put the child in a position of trying to figure out what to do. So all of that though is important and very separate from the issue at hand that we're highlighting, with iCloud negligence, which is the fact that Apple knows, Apple execs at Apple know that child sexual abuse material is stored there, illegal content, and are choosing to do absolutely nothing about it.
Okay. Because they say they actually don't have access to the photos and videos within iCloud?
No, so this is a really interesting, if you kind of read through the lines and watch how the language they use evolved over time.
Yeah.
And something that's really important to point out is when they originally said they would do it, they defended doing it. Like you can go back and read them in articles. There's a very critical interview of Craig Federighi, their head of engineering by the Wall Street Journal, where he defends Apple's decision to do this. And he's like, here's how it's going to work. And we're going to detect only known child sexual abuse material. There's another quote from someone high up at Apple at the time saying like, this, us rolling this out only matters to you if you have a huge collection of child sexual abuse content. For everybody else, like doesn't even pertain to you. Doesn't matter. You're fine. So what's weird is to go from like that language of like extreme confidence that this is something that they can do, and that doesn't imperil the privacy and security of users and, you know, all the things they say now. And then all of a sudden the discourse, the language has changed to like, we're so sorry, this is an important crime, but we can't do anything about it.
Why do you think, I mean, when social media makes decisions like this, it's always down to engagement and profit. Is that what we're talking about here? Probably what, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Privacy is their like core marketing tactic in the US, right? Like you've seen the billboards with the phone and it's like privacy. That's literally their major selling point. And I just want to say like for good reason. And I think this is like a really important part of the story because people will like often say that then we must like be anti-privacy or we're not like, and this is the lie that user privacy and child safety cannot coexist. That's the lie that companies like this perpetuate to make us think they can't do it, but they can. You and I can have our data secure. You and I can have private conversations where you're sending me things that are not illegal, that other people at Apple are not reading. Do you know what I mean? Like that is possible. And the detection of this content is possible. Those things can sit together. And when you ask me like, why don't they want to do it? At the end of the day, it is our belief that it's going to cost them money. It's going to drag them into a lot more legal cases than they have to participate in now, because right now they're able to throw their hands up and say, we're not a part of this. I mean, on their part, it's quite smart because it's saved them money and saved them from having to do the work. And what we're saying now is that's not acceptable. If you're going to be a $1 trillion company, this is going to like, you have to do this work and you have to have these teams. You have to do content moderation at some level when it comes to child sexual abuse material. And so that's what's really at play here.
So sick of being lied to by these companies. Like, I don't understand how this is allowed with the biggest companies in the world, just blatantly lying to families that, and then putting children in danger because of these lies. So one of the comments I got on Instagram regarding this kind of wraps up this conversation. So someone said, so the plaintiffs in the lawsuit would like Apple to monitor everyone's iCloud files and photos. So how you described that, that's not what's happening, that the technology exists to identify child sexual abuse material without looking at all the other content. Is that right?
Absolutely. I love this question. There's nothing more than I like explaining this to people because I also think that that is a fair question, right? Like, we don't want people looking at all of our personal photos or like our kids in the bathtub or like, so it's a fair concern. And the way the detection and the technology works, and this is actually a key part of this lawsuit as well, is that it is only finding known, verified victims of child sexual abuse. So there's nothing new that it's looking for or seeing on your phone, right? It's specifically trained and operating to only find verified and known child sexual abuse victims and to stop the harm that they face. Like another weird way of looking at it too is like, where's their privacy in all of this? So they were raped as a 5-year-old by their dad or their stepdad. And those images and videos have been online for over 10 years and they spread everywhere and they cannot get them down. Like, and they have no ability to like pressure companies to get them down. It just goes like, that's a critical part of this because it's not someone at Apple, like looking at every photo. It's more like a fingerprinting system that just goes like these 4 out of this 200 are wrong.
What about when it does come to like a photo of my daughter in the bathtub? Like what happens to that? That would get flagged.
No.
Why not?
Not under this system. Because again, it's known, verified child sexual abuse content. And that is not, right?
So it's not just nude imagery of children, it's children being abused.
It's children being abused, but I think the bigger thing is that known victims to the National Center for Missing and Exploited the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Like, there's a set of known victims. That's the 2,860. That's who they're looking for within that's why it's not flagged.
Okay. It's like duplicates of imagery that's already been identified as CSAM. Okay.
Duplicates is a good word.
Okay.
Yes.
Makes total sense. Okay. So someone asked this, and I wonder how you would reply. So I don't understand. So did Apple make the CSAM, then upload it to their cloud? Or is it people who got abused and the person who abused them took the photo and kept it on the iCloud? How would Apple be at fault?
So I think of it like Apple has servers, like physical servers, places where they're hosting all this content, that it's their job to keep illegal abuse content off of their servers in their environments. In fact, they say in their terms of service that you cannot house this content there. They're making money off of anything that is housed there.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure we would then want them to not make money off of people housing known abusive, illegal content in an environment that they operate and run. So it's not their fault that the abuse happened, but it's their fault that then a perpetrator was allowed to share that with 35 people and then take it and upload it into Snap or, a different app and share it with a kid. I mean, I think taking a step back, like that's another really important part of this is if you think about kind of like from a pipeline point of view, the fact that all this content can sit and stay in iCloud, it's not just benign or like not active. It's getting actively uploaded into other places constantly by other people. So it's actually like facilitating the sharing and the spreading of it in a way or at a magnitude sort of exponentially more than we've thought in the past. But also like it's kind of think about the harm we could undo if that wasn't there, or how much harder it would then be for some of these abusers to just be sort of trading and sharing this seamlessly. And one of the things that some of the survivors have shared with me over the years, that's also just sort of like an added tragic component of this that's really important is they know that bad people use their abuse images and videos to groom other kids. And that's like often one of the things that troubles them the most. I mean, not that like that someone else is using this horrible thing that happened to them to then do something else horrible to another kid. It's just like a cycle that needs to be interrupted and stopped. And Apple could play a huge role in doing that, and they don't.
They need to. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the App Store recommendations. So a lot of families trust the App Store ratings and allow their child like 12 plus, or is it 4 and then 7 and then 12 and then 17?
Yeah. 4, 8, and 12. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, parents just rely on those ratings. And what I've learned is like you have TikTok as 12 plus, even though you're supposed to be 13. I mean, the ratings are chosen by the company that is off like the app, and then just going through like a automated verification process that very rarely I feel like gets kicked back. So you are asking Apple to make the App Store safer. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. There's a lot to say here.
Yeah.
What I'd like to say is the age ratings in the App Store are a bad word.
Yeah.
Like not real.
Yes.
Like it's totally fake.
Yeah.
Fake. They're not reflective of what kids are going to experience okay, so a really interesting way of thinking about this, and this is a credit to my colleague who kind of came up with this analogy, is like, even with movies and so forth, when you give them a rating, right? PG-13, that's a stagnant piece of content that's been evaluated for age engagement and doesn't change over time.
Yeah.
The problem with the apps is that no matter what the intention is of how it's going to get used, like what you need to look at is actually how is it being used and what does the environment actually look like. So the screenshots of like, this is where your kid goes to do XYZ oftentimes, if you actually download the app and go into it yourself, you're going to see and experience something wildly different than what it says it's going to be. So part of the problem is these are living, breathing environments that need to have their own safety standards and requirements. So it's not like all on Apple or all on the app. It's both things working together. So Apple needs to have better age ratings that are verified by third-party entities to say, like someone who actually knows about child development and children's, like what's good or bad for kids, to say, you're right, this is like 8+, or this is 12+, or this is 4, right? And then we should also talk about like a question of, should the App Store look different on kids' devices than it looks on adult devices? Like maybe they shouldn't, right? Like maybe a lot of these apps shouldn't even be in an app store that kids have access to, right? So there's like all these different places where Apple could do more to strengthen and sort of like cull what are the apps and environments that kids have access to that they don't. And I just want to say something that you said about TikTok that's really important. Because one of the ways that Apple has gotten away with this is by, again, being very like hands off, and they've benefited from the focus on the apps. I just want to make it really, really clear. This is an and conversation. The apps also have incredible problematic issues and they need to be dealt with. And Apple needs to do its part to fix it and make it better. But one thing that really struck me, just about, again, the negligence side of things is recently it was part of a different lawsuit. It's been exposed. There was a conversation between Apple and TikTok where Apple was pushing back on TikTok saying like, it's not really 12+, but they didn't remove them.
I know. What is that? How can that happen?
Because they're making so much money. You're making so much money. I think it's like 20% of their overall revenue a year comes from the App Store. It's like a cash cow. It's just like constant downloads. Like, why stem that tide of revenue if you don't have to?
So they're always going to allow if it's like a question, they're going to let it be the lower age range so that more kids and people can get access to the app so they can make more money. Does the problem with the Apple products like stem from the fact that Apple created all their products for adults and now all of a sudden kids are accessing it and they're trying to patch it up, but that's not working across the board, App Store, device level.
Yeah.
Like kids need safe devices that were built for kids and we have companies doing that, but why won't Apple do that? Popping in here to tell you about the best phone for kids, and that is the Bark phone. If you don't want your kids signing up for social media, an iPhone is not going to do it. They will find their way around the parental controls. The Bark phone starter plan comes with talk and text only. If and when you're ready to start integrating social media access or more apps, there are advanced plans available that offer social media, but not without your approval. Plus, the Bark phone has advanced content monitoring, which will send you alerts of potential dangers. If your child already has an iPhone or an Android and you don't want to switch it up, please layer on Bark parental controls as a baseline. You can set screen time rules, block certain websites and apps, get alerts, and a ton more helpful options for parents. Also, check out the brand new Bark Watch.
That's a really good question. And I think it's one that we grapple with too, of just like where are kind of the boundaries of like where the company takes responsibility or not. I think the key thing here is that Apple knows, whether they're actively promoting it or not, that their devices are ending up in the hands of children. So the baseline should then be, we need to make the devices safer for children, and we need to put all the things in place to, take away risk of them experiencing harm or like ways they can get help. I think that the key thing is they want to make it seem like the device and its operations are fully agnostic, and it's not. It's not another type of like product, like a toy or something where this is like the gateway to, so much immense online harm, but also just, other type addiction and all these other things, right? Being addicted to the products. And it's just behooved them to basically be like, no, that's not us, you know? And now that's sort of getting broken open because we're realizing more and more how much they could be doing at the operating level or at the device level to stop the harm. And I think the broader conversation as a society about like, well, what age should you be to get the phone and what phone, like all of that is like healthy discourse and change happening around this conversation. But at the end of the day, there will be parents who still give their kids the phone and at young ages. And so we want to be looking out for those kids.
Yeah. Okay. So both things need to happen. Society needs to keep moving towards safer choices on the devices, giving them later, all those things, and having conversations with the child about that's why that's being done. But then also understanding that, yes, kids are still going to get their parents' hand-me-down iPhones at 8 or 9 years old. And how do we protect them, right? Because the company, I mean, hopefully through lawsuits and maybe legislation, they will become more responsible, but they're definitely not doing it of their own accord.
Yeah, and that was a big premise behind the beginnings of Heat, actually, is we're trying to borrow a model and a strategy that has been used to change kind of like really powerful industries that seem intractable that we could never win against. But the reality is, if you go back and look like the tobacco industry, they won major lawsuits against the tobacco industry. And then a lot of, you know, not only for survivors and victims, but they were able to take funds like that and put them into other programmatic work to fight them longer term. Like there's a actual, like, there's history here, I guess I should say, in fighting oil and gas companies. So we need to think about tech companies now like oil and gas or tobacco, what worked against them and how do we sort of mirror that now around tech accountability.
Yeah. And I think now's the time. We're seeing great progress in lawsuits like coming from families against TikTok, against Snapchat, and all of this being revealed and judges saying, wait a minute, like you can't hide behind decades old laws anymore. Like we need to have you take some responsibility for what you were perpetuating or serving to children or allowing to happen to children. I want to touch briefly on the fact that Apple iPads are given to children in school as young as 4 years old. What is your opinion on that generally?
I feel like you're the leader on this topic.
Yeah.
Because I've seen I followed it very closely, like things that have even happened to your own kids and like kids of friends. So I'm not as knowledgeable about all the ways that Apple is sort of like forcing their products into schools at earlier ages to sort of ensure that those are kids that then want like an iPad, not a tablet, or an iPhone, not a, you know, whatever phone,
right?
A Bark phone, which might be safer for them or whatever. But I do think it's something that we all need to look at more critically of what is the motivation behind getting their devices in schools earlier on, and what's the result, and also just like what's the culture that's perpetuating. I guess what I want to say about it is there is a way, and I think there should be a way that kids learn how to code and learn technology and become very like technically have a lot of high technical aptitude. That is completely different than having personal devices, being on social media, being in applications or environments like iMessage where you're communicating without any type of oversight as a child. Like those are two different things. And so we can easily have both. Again, this is like going back to that like and thing. And we just need to detach from like specific brands and like kids getting addicted to those brands earlier on for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. A mom the other day said, I want to give my kid a Bark phone, but she really doesn't want one. She wants an iPhone because it's a branding thing. And also they're used to using Apple devices, either whether in school or their parents' device or whatever from when they're young. But like to close up the thing about schools, I think if we look at how it's actually going, I mean, Apple's whole shtick is privacy. So you put that in a school setting and the school administrators are trying to lock them down, but the kids are finding ways around it. They get so distracted. The average time they spend on a schoolwork thing is like 6 minutes before they start playing a game or going on social media or messaging their friend.
Oh, wow.
So it's a lot about just the distractions that are available to them because administrators can't appropriately lock them down because they're not built for this. They're built for adults to be able to do things privately and high functioning and jump around and do whatever they want on these devices. Anything else on the lawsuit that we didn't talk about that you think is important for kind of parents to be reflecting on here?
What I would say is, or I think just something I'd like to say about it in general is this represents justice for some of the individuals who really have experienced like the worst of the worst kind of abuse. And, you know, you mentioned like who's coming on the podcast in the future weeks and so forth, like survivors of this for really important security reasons and so forth can't do a lot of the media that you know, and tell the story in a way that doesn't then potentially affect their safety. And so we're asking many people to care about someone that they're not going to get to meet or have this type of interaction with. And yet at the same time, I think it's really important to remember that if Apple took this step of looking for known child sexual abuse in their environments, it will inevitably lead to the recovery of the child who is being actively abused now, who's new. Because some person who's abusing their own kid or abusing a kid they know will also have CSAM in their iCloud. So like, this is like life and death, really urgent work that needs to happen. And that's why we need everybody to care about it for so many reasons. But I would just encourage people to think about the humans that are at the heart of this lawsuit, not some of the technical questions about like how is Apple going to do it. They're the most valuable in the company in the world with the smartest engineers in the world. Like they can do this. It's a will. Do they have the will? And so I think especially just knowing your audience and like who you reach, asking people to care about this lawsuit for that reason and kind of carry it with them in that way would be something I would ask.
So sharing the story around and thinking about the children and human beings that are still being victimized about this content that is identifiable and Apple has the ability to remove. So this is so important. And is there anything else you would advise parents regarding like our own child's use? I mean, obviously, maybe we would agree that Apple iPhones are not the best first choice for kids in protecting them. But is there anything parents should be thinking about regarding our choices?
And I say this with like very little judgment, but I am always the parent that's like, what's the photo release form like for this camp or this? Like, I think just not feeling bad about asking those questions. I think we have a really active conversation in our house too about like photos and how, you know, easy it is for them to spread. And like, even if you didn't mean to take it or send it, like, here's the reality of it. Again, not in a shame way, but more just in like a factual way. And I think when you, again, borrowing from my colleague, like she outlined for her like 10-year-old that the companies don't have the best interests for you in mind. Like they're trying to make you addicted to it. Like my own kids tell me to get off my phone. So once the kids know that it's not like a good thing, sort of let them run with that and it'll all kind of balance itself out. Right. I think keeping an open and honest conversation with them, one that's not like fear-based or shame-based, but also reminding of that, of like what can happen and what might, you know, is like the best route always.
Yeah. And to like advocate. So, you know, I'm fighting for my children to be able to use tech safer and not have to keep it from them all the time, you know, and they know kind of what I'm doing in that. So if you're a parent that has emailed the school or emailed your representative, like let them know what you're working on for them. Cause I mean, the advocacy thing is so important, and a good lesson for them to advocate for themselves as well. Okay. So where can listeners connect with HEAT and then also follow along with the lawsuit?
Heatinitiative.org is our website. But one thing I'd like to point people to is we do have a Rally Starter petition effort going where you can go on our website and email, I think it's like 18 or 20 of the top Apple executives right now, these demands specifically. It's very cool. We have 20,000 emails that have gone to Apple already.
Yeah.
Because one of the things they told us so many years ago when they killed the plan, this was back when I was working in the field, was, well, we don't know. We're not hearing from parents. Like, we don't, like, is this what they want? Like, do they? And we're like, okay, we can solve that problem.
Yeah.
So that's there so that it's like a big signal. Like, yes. So I encourage people to go sign up and send that email to Apple asking for these changes. That would be huge and really, really appreciated and helpful. And then, follow along as we go through this process. We'll keep everyone apprised of how it progresses and, hopefully, moves Apple to make the changes even sooner.
Yeah. They've got to, with all this pressure and how it's laid out so clearly. And so I will include all of that in the episode notes. Thank you so much for putting that petition together. I've found that to be super helpful because parents, when they come off of these conversations, are like, what can I do right now? Like, what step can I take? So we will all be just sending out those emails to Apple. That's huge. So Sarah, thank you. Thank you for protecting children, for all the work you and your team do. And we'll stay in touch for sure.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.